And then when we sort of were just about to shoot Malibu Crush, I think it was at that point where it was like, okay, well, I've studied a lot behind the scenes on being a director. I have directed before. I'd done some commercials and some fashion commercials, which were, quite large budgets. This would be a great challenge, but also just, I think the final motivator was just, I think, and this happens a lot in Hollywood. If you really want to do something, sometimes you've got to sort of be the driver, like you've got to make it happen instead of just waiting for the perfect moment or waiting for everyone else to make it.
Power Ace Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Power Real Talk. Now, today we have an exclusive interview with an award-winning actor, director, and former four-time Australian Auctioneer of the Year winner. Welcome, James Pratt.
Thanks very much, Olivia. It's really nice to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, and it's awesome to have you on the show with us. So I wanted to firstly kick things off with, now you have a strong acting background. You studied at a prestigious school, the National Institutes of Dramatic Arts in Kensington. And this was where you obviously learned acting, and before landing a guest role on the hit TV show Home and Away and Fremantle's Media Wonderland. So what made you decide to become an actor?
I think, it's a good question because mainly growing up, I was more interested in surfing and just having fun. But when you kind of get to the end of high school, there's that kind of, it's like a diving board. You kind of jump off into something new. And I think that's probably where I sort of realized I was quite creative. And that was probably a big part of it, doing something that's more creative. I did study real estate at the same time when I was at NIDA. So there was that push from my parents where it's like, okay, well, if you want to be an actor, you've kind of also got to study something more business related, which I think was great. But yeah, definitely the creative side is where my heart is at.
Yeah, and I mean, since then, you've done a range of films. Your recent one, which is a fantastic film to watch, is Malibu Crush. And
Oh, thank you.
And I just wanted to firstly, because that was one of your recent films that you made, and I wanted for you to tell the listeners a bit about the film.
Sure. Yeah. So probably the best way to describe it is anyone that likes Dumb and Dumber. It's just like that on a lower budget about two guys, two best friends that are pretty much just slackers. They're unemployed. They have very little hope for the future. They learn that one of their ex-girlfriends is getting married in Australia. So they come to Australia from the US, from LA. And the way they're able to do that is they pretend they're a part of a film school exchange program, where this film school in Australia thinks they're getting these two really hot film school directors. And obviously there's quite a bit of shock when the two lead characters that they don't even know what a camera does, turn up in Australia. And their quest is to find the girl. But the stake, I think there's, for anyone watching, thinking, and what's the sort of the comedy element as well, is just trying to keep up that appearance that they're film school professionals while they're trying to shoot these TV commercials for windmill restaurants in Australia. So it's Dumb and Dumber come to Bondi Beach in Australia.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a film worth watching. And how long, because I know that you also directed the film yourself. That must have been a bit challenging, being in it and then directing it.
Yeah, that was never the plan as well. That was that was the result of COVID, basically, because we actually shot almost all of it in Australia during COVID. And then that was that point where, people, because I'm Australian, but I'm in the US, but Australia kind of asked everyone to come back during COVID. And so it was that time where there was sort of 12 months while I was back in Australia before going back to the US, where I was like, hey, let's make a movie. And one of the kind of the hard things is during COVID that, a lot of people who were directors didn't want to necessarily be on a film set possibly getting sick or possibly having to work in those conditions. So that was kind of like the last ditch thing for me to direct it, which, yeah, you're right, it's kind of wearing more than one hat. I would have loved to have just been sort of an actor, a producer on it, but yeah, it was a great experience. And yeah, I appreciate the kind words as well.
Well, I mean, it was a fantastic film to watch. And as you said, you obviously were a director. So what made you transition to be a director? Was that your first role as directing?
Yeah, well, I'd done a documentary in 2011 as the director. It's called Summer Promise, which was a great experience. But I think at the time I sort of felt like, hey, I'd love to sort of keep doing things in front of the camera and keep learning before I dive in to be a director again. And then I've sort of studied since then. And then when we sort of were just about to shoot Malibu Crush, I think it was at that point where it was like, okay, well, I've studied a lot behind the scenes on being a director. I have directed before. I've done some commercials and some fashion commercials, which were, quite large budgets. This would be a great challenge, but also just, I think the final motivator was just, I think, and this happens a lot in Hollywood. If you really want to do something, sometimes you've got to sort of be the driver, like you've got to make it happen instead of just waiting for the perfect moment or waiting for everyone else to make it. And I think, there was a few other people on the film could see that if we were going to make this film, it was that window while we're all back in Australia with COVID. There was some really great people like Camaret Golf Course, Wingmill Restaurants. They said, hey, you can shoot here whenever you like, which probably wasn't going to be there post-COVID because they'd have people, obviously back on the golf course and things. So it was just taking advantage of the moment. And since then there's been more directing work which has come up, which has been really humbling. But I will say, yeah, like for anyone out there, it's much better if you can just be the actor or just the director. Definitely not both.
Well, I mean, directing has been a passion for you, and I noticed that in 2012 you made a short film called
Oh,
New York
yes.
Model Agent. So how did that
Yes.
happen?
Yeah, that's a funny story because I was that kind of really kickstarted my career. And it's funny you bring that up because I forgot to say, yes, I directed that as well. I was living in the middle of nowhere in Outback Australia. It was really in the middle of nowhere, but it had the most stunning visuals you'll ever find. Like, wheat fields and canola fields, cotton fields that spread for like 5,000 acres. Crop duster plains. It was just incredible. Very small town though. And right before I left, I made this $200 short film, which, if you can imagine trying to find like editors, actors, writers, producers, makeup artists out there, it meant that I kind of had to wear quite a few hats just to make it. And so I made this short film about this guy from New York that comes to the middle of Australia looking for a model, like a supermodel contestant, to save his career. And it actually ended up being a finalist at NBC Shorts Fest in San Francisco that year, which at the time was a really big festival. And I remember because after that, NBC Universal actually, contacted me about some like a feature film script. And I remember they were really blown away thinking I had this huge budget to go into the middle of the outback to shoot it and to have those cinematic looks. And I kind of didn't want to tell them, but the secret sauce was no, like I was actually living there. So that's why it looked so good at the time. But that was a really, that was a kind of like a passion project that ended up going really well. And like I said, it kind of put me on the radar with them, and a few things came after that, which was really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, you're obviously very talented because you only had a budget of like $200, wasn't it?
Yeah, $100 to hire the camera and $100 for catering. That
Oh
was
my
it.
gosh.
Or the actors that I got were from the local radio station mainly, and a couple of people out there that I sort of said, "Hey, do you want to be in a movie?" That I thought could be really what's the right word? Truthful, because they looked like locals. And I struck it really good with this makeup artist who'd married a guy that she was a really professional makeup artist. She'd worked on MTV and all these big back in Sydney for like 20 years. And she'd married a guy who'd inherited a ranch, which was thousands of acres. And she's kind of moved into the middle of nowhere with him. And she was really keen just to do some work. So apart from her, there was no one else that had any experience, which made it really fun. But it also meant, like I said, for $200, it kind of meant that I had to kind of wear multiple hats.
Yeah, I mean, you did your own like writing, directing, acting. That must have been very, very difficult at times, juggling it all.
Yeah, the one silver lining I will say is it was, and I have never had that in my experience again, but when you're in that sort of like ecosystem, people really trust you. So it's like, it's okay if you make mistakes. Whereas sort of in Hollywood, you make a mistake and it's like, the other producers have worked on enough films to pick up on it very quick. And you kind of feel like, okay, well, like, yeah, let's not make that again. Or let's kind of, keep it going. But it did feel like I could sort of fail a little bit and no one was going to suddenly say, hey, like, he forgot to get the wide shot, but he got all the others. Or so early on in my career, it was a fun experience. Yeah.
And I mean, it must have been a real life experience,
Oh yeah, I've never been back to the outback there since that was shot, just because that was that moment in time when I was there. So it's kind of, I guess, yeah, like that's kind of like a memory from my time there, which has been, yeah, it's a nice transition going through life.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the films that you make and create and even acting, they do resonate with people. Now, going back to even Malibu Crush, a comedy, you even said in one interview that if you could make one person laugh, that's all the success. So is that your drive and determination to produce this art?
Yeah, like I mean, if you're in Hollywood, it's pretty clear that it's very much like a business. So sometimes people think like, oh, well, like, why is that actor always in the same movies? He or she is terrible. Or why is that movie so terrible? The first one was really good and the second one was really bad. The answer is because it's a business. So 99% of the process usually is business and 1% is creative. And so, when you're asking me like, the driver with, if I could do my own projects, it's not to make money. It's, if I make a comedy, it's to make people laugh. Or if it can tell a story that just one person likes, then, that's really pleasing. Whereas obviously if you're working for a studio, it's like, hey, forget the story, forget one person. It's like, if this movie doesn't make this much money, then it's an enormous failure. And, there'll be some people in the hot seat. So passion projects are different to working like, professionally. But at the same time, yeah, like if I can do my own passion projects, there is an element of, I'd love to just tell, truthful stories or comedies. I wanted to make Malibu Crush a little bit more like American Pie-esque, like a little bit push the comedy a little bit more. But I mean, it's kind of hard to do during COVID. And also, yeah, it was a wild ride, anyway, shooting when you could only have a certain amount of people on set. And it was during that time. So,
yeah. And I mean, unfortunately, yeah, COVID was a very challenging time. And I know you touched on Hollywood. Now, could you share to us any transformations that Hollywood had changed in recent years?
yeah, I mean, I think the big one is just the cinema experience has kind of really been absorbed by the small screen, which is streaming services. So the idea that like the first time you'll see a movie is when it comes out at the cinema has been taken away from, okay, the first time you see the movie, it's a Netflix original or it's a Paramount Plus original. And so people are getting used to consuming really good content just from their lounge room. which I think sort of takes away the filmmaking process a little bit, because a lot of films were shot to be shown on the big screen. Like, to give you an idea, like if you remember the film Gladiator, or even Star Wars, I mean, those films are made for you to see it, 16:9, like stretched right out in a cinema. You get the best experience. But I think a lot of people will just watch it, on their iPhone, or they'll watch it on an iPad. So it sort of puts it in a different category. It's good and bad. I mean, it's great for the filmmaker that you've got another distribution platform, which is the streaming services. But the negative is, unfortunately, there's a lot of terrible content that's coming with it. And the reason for that is a studio like, Paramount is in the business of making movies. A streaming service like Netflix is in the business of being a content curator, like a technical platform, a tech platform. So there isn't quite the same esteem where it's like Netflix says, hey, we want to win an Oscar every single category this year. It's more, we need subscribers. So the quality of film goes down, which is, I mean, again, it's good and bad. It's great for the filmmaker, but I have heard a lot of people say, hey, like it takes me 10 minutes to scroll through streaming platforms to find anything good these days. My answer to that is, yeah, like it's a different beast, a studio versus a content curator.
Yeah, and I mean, having an inside gossip, as I normally do you
Sure.
have any fun stories from working on set?
Yeah, I mean, there's always some sort of crazy story. What sort of story would you like? Is there any kind of like idea of crazy you're looking for?
Oh, I don't mind. The better. It's up to
I
you.
think I'm just thinking. I mean, this is not really a crazy story. Actually, this is not even a story for me. This is a story I heard the other day from a friend of mine. He was shooting an indie film, and they called the police on him because people were driving past, and it was like an indie film, kind of like an action James Bond film. And these people called the police and said there's like a shootout. They were shooting, obviously, but the people driving past couldn't see cameras. And his film set, his film set got temporarily shut down with like real SWAT team coming in, thinking that there was like a shootout in the suburbs. That was one, but one that actually resonates with me. This is probably a good story. A friend of mine, very talented filmmaker, was making this film for Jason Blum, which is Blumhouse Productions. They had funded it, and it's his first film, and he said, hey, like, can you help me find a house for one of the scenes? And I was like, sure. He's like, we're really struggling. We're trying to find a house that we can sort of knock down a couple of walls. So it's like a renovator or a house that's going to be demolished eventually. No one's living in it. And the movie was like a horror film. So it was like, looking for kind of like an old abandoned sort of house. I found one, and it was a pretty nice house, but it was just one of those houses where the owner hadn't, it had fallen in disrepair or whatever, but it was a big house, about 4 bedrooms. Anyway, long story short, they did the scene and they accidentally burnt the house down.
Oh my gosh.
And there's like at the end of the film, like the fire trucks come and stuff, and like it's on camera, the fire trucks come. And I said to him when I watched it, like, wow, it looks super believable. He's like, yeah, they were real fire trucks. And then when it went back to the production house in Hollywood, they loved it. They were so blown away that he was able to shoot such a high budget, even getting a house and burning it down on the budget that they had. So yeah, like it kind of worked in his favor. What happened to the owner of the house? Believe it or not, the owner of the house was not that angry. I'm not sure whether he was hoping that he could get a good insurance payout or whatever, but he wasn't that upset. It was almost like, okay, well, maybe that's a sign for me to now build a brand new house and I have insurance. Because yeah, they were filling the house with smoke for the final scene, and not with a smoke machine, but they wanted to kind of have like something burning in the background. And that's when it just, on camera, it just took off. And
wow.
so, yeah.
Something so not meant to happen, but it turns out to be, helps people, you know, the owner and then the studio.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's people out there who's probably going, wow, like that's a really complicated scene, like, you know, coordinating like fire trucks and putting their house out on fire. And yeah, so yeah, that was a fun story.
Wow, you must share more of these stories. They're really actually fascinating to listen to. And
Yeah, no, Hollywood always has like some crazy element to it, mixed with the yeah, all the other things that go on.
yeah, and I mean, from your time in Hollywood, you have obviously, I must say this, won many awards, winning Best Actor for Los Angeles Film Awards, to the winner of the Best Actor again, Fox International Film Awards. Now, briefly, how do you feel in that moment when they called out your name and you won it?
Yeah, it's well, probably the best one, or not the best one, but the one that was probably really surprising was one called the Hollywood Beyond Hollywood Film Festival. And the reason why that one was like, and I'm going to bring that up to sort of like single out, is just because I had quite a few people there with me. I had a girl called Melody, a guy called Bayard, his wife, another friend of mine, Tabitha, my manager. Like there was quite a group of people there. And on top of that, I had this friend of mine that had flown without telling me all the way to Hawaii to be at the awards ceremony. So there was like just a little bit of pressure. Like I kind of I didn't want this guy to kind of be like, oh yeah, he's flown all the way to Hawaii to see me not win. So it was nice to win because it also meant like, hey, like there's a lot of people here that have made an effort to be here. So yeah, that was a special one. Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, we are running out of time, but I really want to get into this. Now, this is
Sure.
a bit further away from acting. Now, you are regarded as one of the most successful real estate auctioneers for luxury homes. Now, I was very curious about this because from acting to being an auctioneer, what made you decide to do that?
Well, that was kind of like when I was at NIDA studying real estate.
Mhm.
And auctioneers is all like it's a bit of a push and pull. So there's been periods like straight after acting school, I really went hard with the auctioneering and really enjoyed it. And then kind of got to that point where I said, hey, like I'll take my foot off and I want to go back into the film industry. And so, you know, back in the film industry full time. So it's like that's been something I've been really able to take with me. And a lot of that's also just to do with, you know, like different challenges. Like I got really like I said, I love acting, I love filmmaking, telling stories. And then there was like a moment with auctioneering, which was going really well. And I kind of thought, look, I really want to achieve a few goals here that are quite high up. And that was exciting. And then I achieved them. And it was like, okay, great, I've done that. Now I've got goals for the film industry. So I want to go into that as well. And so it's been that kind of self-growth where it's like, yeah, really pursued the auctioneering for about, you know, 8 or 9 years out of you know, from a very young age, and then really pursued the acting and the filmmaking. So it's, yeah, they have a lot of similarities and they also have a lot of things that they don't have in common. But you know, just really grateful for the ride because there's been some really good people I've met along the way.
Yeah, and you are very successful in this field. You have been Australian Auctioneer of the Year award, not only in 2019, but also in 2020. And you also founded the James Pratt Auctioneers Group, where you work with big names like Mark Wahlberg. And that's very interesting to see. And that must be very difficult. I mean, not difficult, different.
Yeah, I mean, it's the big difference I'd put is as a real estate auctioneer, you're dealing in an industry which is quite A to B, like list, sell, you know, market a house, sell a house, move on. So it's a big tangible asset, but like as an example, you maybe only work on the house for, you know, 3-4 weeks, and then the house is sold. The difference is, you know, in the film industry, you know, you can work on a film for, you know, 1-2 years before it gets released, or a TV show, you shoot it 1 year and then studio holds back the release for a year and then it comes out on the third year. So there's definitely like a time difference, and also just the location. I mean, real estate auctions are not very big in America. They're huge in Australia, but in America, the film industry is huge. But in Australia, the film industry is relatively small in comparison. So it's also kind of, I think, your surroundings that really dictate just what your goals are going to be. And like I said, I think, for me, that was some goals that I had while I was in Australia. In America, the goals aligned are a little bit different, but at the same time, yeah, it's, as long as it's challenging, then I'm really happy. If something's not challenging, I get very bored, and it's like, yeah, nothing easy is worth doing.
Absolutely. And from that, I know you are currently in pre-production mode on 2 new feature films, and you're filming in January next year. So could we get like a glimpse into this intriguing projects that on your horizon?
Yeah, definitely. Look out for a film that's going to be called Mirage of Redemption. Our best way to describe that is it's a coming of age film that's going to be shot on the outskirts of, not the outskirts, but just in the less glamorous side of Las Vegas, the slightly poor areas, which that'll be really fun. There's a few comedy elements in it, but it's definitely no Dumb and Dumber, unfortunately. And the other film is a little bit similar. It's quite a heavy hitting drama with some sort of big takeaways about a couple that's living in downtown LA and getting out of that lifestyle, and taking advantage of a lucky break. So yeah, unfortunately, if I had it my way, I would love to say I'm doing a slapstick, stupid guy humor comedy. But these are going to be fantastic films, and yeah, so look out for them.
Yes, well, we'll be looking forward to seeing that in action. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Now, it was an honor to have you on our show today, and thank you for taking time to come and talk to us.
Oh, Olivia, thank you very much for the interview, and great job as well.
Thank you.
You're traveling on the airwaves of Power Ace Radio.